In the increasingly volatile and transformative landscape of African geopolitics, few figures have emerged as decisively and defiantly as Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the military leader turned head of state of Burkina Faso.
I'm archiving every distortion. I am Ibrahim Traore, and today I'm pulling off your masks. Yes, you heard correctly. I, whom you call a young military junta leader.
Since his dramatic seizure of power in September 2022, Traoré has not merely acted as a transitional figure in a country racked by insecurity and economic despair. He has become the ideological spearhead of a broader anti-Western pan-Africanist movement. His governance is redefining regional alliances, shifting global perceptions of African leadership, and reigniting debates around post-colonial sovereignty and Western hegemony on the continent. Traoré's story is inseparable from the historical currents that have shaped Burkina Faso's past and present. Once a French colony known as Upper Volta, Burkina Faso, like many other former colonies, inherited a fragile and externally dependent system upon gaining independence. Post-independence leaders either fell to coups or aligned themselves with Western interests in exchange for military and financial support. The notable exception was Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary Marxist leader who ruled from 1983 until his assassination in 1987.
Il y en a qui demandent mais où se trouve l'impérialisme? L'impérialisme, regardez dans vos assiettes quand vous mangez les grains de riz, de maïs, de mil importés. C'est ça l'impérialisme. N'allez pas plus loin.
Sankara's policies of self-reliance, anti-imperialism, and social transformation remain etched in the national memory. And many now see Traoré as the spiritual successor to that unfinished revolution. At only 36, Traoré is the world's youngest sitting head of state, yet his political maturity has surprised even seasoned analysts. His speeches are sharp, ideologically rooted, and deeply resonant with a generation of Africans who feel betrayed by democracy's hollow promises under Western tutelage. We do not need lessons in governance from those who once enslaved our ancestors, he once stated in a televised address. What we need is dignity, freedom, and the power to decide our own fate. This kind of rhetoric, while inflammatory to some, is electrifying to millions who see in Traoré a leader brave enough to say what others dare not. The political transition under his leadership has been anything but conventional. Far from making immediate plans to return to civilian rule or hold multi-party elections, Traoré has instead argued for what he calls a people's transition, a political reformation that prioritizes national sovereignty, economic independence, and cultural decolonization before reintroducing electoral processes. This has put him at odds with international institutions like the African Union and ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, which traditionally impose strict timelines for elections after military takeovers. Traoré, however, has made it clear that Burkina Faso will not be rushed or bullied into adopting what he calls externally imposed models of governance. His foreign policy choices reflect this firm ideological stance. In rapid succession, Traoré expelled French military forces from Burkina Faso, revoked media licenses from state-backed French broadcasters such as RFI and France 24, and rejected military aid offers that came with strings attached. In place of these long-standing Western partnerships, he has forged new ones with alternative global powers. Most notably, Burkina Faso has deepened its ties with Russia, whose Wagner-affiliated paramilitary entities have reportedly begun supporting Sahelian governments in exchange for mining rights and regional influence. China, too, has increased its investments in infrastructure and mineral extraction in the region, promoting what Beijing brands as win-win cooperation. In parallel with these strategic moves, Traoré has been instrumental in forming the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. a tri-national bloc comprising Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, all led by military governments that came to power through coups. The AES has pledged mutual defense, economic coordination, and a collective rejection of foreign interference, particularly from France. It has also signaled the beginning of a shift away from the CFA franc, the colonial-era currency used in many Francophone African countries and tied to the French treasury. In the eyes of the AES leaders, breaking free from this monetary arrangement is a necessary step toward full political and economic emancipation. But with this bold resistance comes equally bold consequences. Western nations have responded to Traoré's defiance with increasing pressure. France has suspended all development cooperation with Burkina Faso, while the European Union has withdrawn security assistance programs. The United States has issued strong statements criticizing the erosion of democratic norms and has frozen non-humanitarian aid. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund have expressed concern over what they call governance risks, placing additional financial strain on a country already struggling under the weight of insurgency and inflation. Domestically, the picture is complicated. Though Traoré enjoys strong support from youth movements, rural populations, and elements of the military, his regime has come under fire for restricting press freedoms, intimidating political opposition, and centralizing power. Independent journalists face harassment, and some prominent critics have mysteriously disappeared. Civil society organizations, while cautious in their opposition, have raised alarms over the shrinking space for public discourse and the potential long-term risks of authoritarian rule masquerading as revolution. Still, Traoré's message continues to resonate across the continent. In nations like Guinea, Senegal, and Chad, protesters have invoked his name while demonstrating against perceived Western meddling. Social media accounts dedicated to Pan-African unity and anti-imperialist causes often circulate clips of his speeches alongside historical footage of Sankara, Lumumba, and Nkrumah. Murals in Ouagadougou and Bamako now depict Traoré as part of a pantheon of African revolutionaries, many of whom were either silenced or assassinated before realizing their visions.
You will hear about the African Union. Yes, it exists. But what is the effect of the African Union in reality? We cannot talk about integration in the theme and not talk about the African Union. Because it is this organization that should unite us, create real integration. But we regret to see these wars that persist on the African continent, killing millions of young people.
What sets this moment apart, however, is the global context. Unlike the Cold War era, when African nations were often pawns in superpower chess games, today's Africa is operating in a more fluid, multipolar world. The decline of US influence, the internal divisions within the European Union, the growing assertiveness of Russia and China, and the rise of new Middle Eastern and BRICS partnerships have created room for African agency. Leaders like Traoré are exploiting that space, not merely as a survival strategy, but as a deliberate reorientation of Africa's place in the global hierarchy. The long-term sustainability of Traoré's model remains uncertain. Burkina Faso continues to face daily violence from jihadist insurgent groups. Economic conditions remain harsh, and regional instability threatens to spill across borders. Should his government fail to deliver security or economic progress, public support could erode quickly, especially if the country becomes too dependent on new external actors, even if they are not Western. There's also the danger that revolutionary rhetoric could become a veil for unchecked militarism, where the promise of freedom is replaced by a culture of fear. Nonetheless, the questions that Traoré is forcing the world and Africa to confront are real and urgent. How long will African nations remain economically dependent on their former colonizers? What kind of governance models truly reflect the will and values of African societies? Can a continent long fragmented by borders drawn in European capitals finally come together in solidarity against foreign exploitation? And above all, who gets to define what African progress looks like? In Traoré's vision, the answers to these questions cannot come from Washington, Paris, or Brussels. They must come from Ouagadougou, Bamako, Niamey, and the countless towns and villages where ordinary Africans live, dream, and struggle. Whether he will be remembered as a liberator, a disruptor, or a dictator remains to be seen. But for now, Ibrahim Traoré has captured the imagination of a continent that is once again daring to dream of freedom, not just from war or poverty, but from control. As Captain Ibrahim Traoré continues to reshape Burkina Faso's political destiny and challenge the dominance of Western powers in Africa, one truth becomes increasingly clear. The continent is undergoing a profound transformation. His leadership, bold and controversial, has ignited conversations not just about one nation's sovereignty, but about the very future of African independence, identity, and unity. Whether viewed as a liberator leading a long overdue revolution, or as a military ruler consolidating power under the banner of nationalism, Traoré has undeniably become a symbol of a rising resistance. His movement reflects the growing frustration of a generation no longer willing to accept economic dependency, foreign occupation, and political interference. In his speeches, actions, and alliances, he is redefining what it means to lead in Africa, not as a puppet of global powers, but as a force for self-determination. The world is watching this moment unfold as Burkina Faso and other Sahel nations step out of the shadows of colonial legacy and into the uncertain but hopeful light of self-guided change. It is not just a political shift, but a reawakening of consciousness across the continent. What we are witnessing is not merely a power transition, but a historic statement. Africa will speak for itself. And as history is written in real time, one can only wonder how this resistance will evolve, and how deeply it will shape the continent's path forward. In a world where global narratives are often controlled by the loudest and most powerful voices, stories like that of Ibrahim Traoré offer a different lens, one that challenges decades of political dominance, economic exploitation, and cultural erasure imposed by foreign interests on African soil. Traoré is not merely a military figure or a transitional leader. He represents a growing wave of resistance that is sweeping across the African continent, a movement built on reclaiming sovereignty, rejecting neo-colonial influence, and forging a future on African terms. His rise is part of a broader awakening among the youth, the intellectuals, and the forgotten voices who are now demanding dignity, accountability, and a system that reflects the realities and aspirations of African people rather than serving outside agendas. From Burkina Faso to Mali, Niger, and beyond, this resistance is not just about changing regimes, but to the undercurrents of change that challenge everything we thought we knew about power, freedom, and the role of the Global South in shaping the 21st century. If this story moved you, inspired you, or opened your eyes to a side of history rarely told, don't forget to like this video, share it with others who need to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more bold, unfiltered insights into the people, politics, and movements reshaping our world. Tap the bell icon so you never miss an update, and become part of a community that believes in truth, justice, and the power of stories to spark real change.